Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the third episode of Vindication Sports. I'm your host, Jackson Hester, and today I want to talk to you guys about the Philadelphia 76ers. This team had a lot of hype coming into this season. I think a lot of people really were hoping this would be the year that they actually started to compete for championships. Last year they had a pretty good showing in the playoffs. They were only failed by the eventual champion Toronto Raptors. And if you watch that series, and I've talked about this series a little bit before, it's really great. But you know that Joel Embiid wasn't really healthy the whole time, and he missed a couple games. I believe he missed Game 3. I don't actually remember if he missed more, but I know that he was on a minute restriction for at least a few of those games. So I think really a lot of that stuff could have gone either way. And last year was a lot different than this year's roster. Obviously, they had Jimmy Butler. It's really hard to find a good closing player in the NBA. Somebody you can really just give the ball and say, okay, Hail Mary, you got you. We need a bucket so bad. Jimmy Butler was definitely the guy for them last year. It's going to be interesting to see if they're ready to fully commit to the Joel Embiid or bust train. Maybe in the early 2000s, that was still really a viable thing to just play 100% through your center. But nowadays, I'm not sure with the way that the floor is spread out and the way that, just defensive principles kind of have come together over the years that's really a winning strategy. And the reason that I even, bring up whether or not it's a winning strategy, because I think that you can win with a lot of teams. If you have Joel Embiid on your team, a lot of players, basically that fit around him really well. Not really these players. I don't think anyone really in a build-a-player workshop would ever build Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons to be on the same team. Joel Embiid is, in theory, a really good center to pair with Ben Simmons because he can spread the floor and run the floor, and he's just really dominant and big, and he's going to be a good defensive partner for Ben Simmons. Pretty, stout perimeter defense play. Joel Embiid's going to lock up that center. Defense has never been a problem for the 76ers. In fact, transition offense has never been a problem for the 76ers. Ben Simmons is great in transition, and Joel Embiid is not a slouch at all. I would say Joel Embiid has got definitely more complete game than Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons holds himself back by not being able to shoot. I know this has been talked to absolute death. But, having your point guard not stretch the floor even a little bit is pretty hard to overcome. It's not very conducive to winning. In the early and late 2000s, we really saw a lot of point guards that couldn't shoot. One of the best point guards in the league, he's still in the league today, Rajon Rondo. He couldn't really shoot at all. Now he can kind of shoot a little bit, and people will argue with you to death because that Celtics team just always has an infinite amount of defenders to defend their one championship, which is just, I don't know, pretty Celtics if you ask me. But, I just don't think Ben Simmons really is too effective at the point guard position these days. He's like a Magic Johnson type player, Magic Johnson type transcendent player, but the problem is you just don't have the right kind of players around him. I feel like Ben Simmons would rather play with somebody like Dave. I was talking about him in the last segment I did. Davis Bertans is really a lot better of a fit for Ben Simmons than Joel Embiid. I think that the paint pretty much needs to be completely just left open, and a team needs to be built around Ben Simmons for you to get all the value out of him. Really think like Milwaukee and what they did with Giannis and just straight shooters around him. And you can even look at the 2 years ago Pelicans team that swept the Blazers in the first round. That was a really great example of how to build a team with just straight shooters and a star. Not every team is designed to win a championship. I feel like we all know that. But this team was 76ers. I think coming into the season, people were really hyping them up. People were expecting them to really get a lot of wins. I myself was probably putting them around 55 wins, which is really a lot higher than their results ended up. I know we didn't get to play though. We only got to play we only got to play 65 games, and they won 39 of those. And if you kind of keep their ratio and pace, they're going to win. They would have won like 48 games in an 80 game season, which is definitely not bad. That's a lot better than I thought that their record would extrapolate to be. But, I think it's still disappointing because we came into the year saying, maybe they have potentially the best starting five in the entire league. And that's not an exaggeration. That's not a joke. I mean, you've got 5 players, legitimate, names that people know. Maybe 1 or 2 of the players are a little bit obscure, but I think any NBA fan knows all 5 of these guys pretty well, knows what they do. And maybe we should have seen that these pieces really don't fit together too well. You got Ben Simmons at the 1. Really, he plays like a 4, which is kind of interesting. He pushes the ball up. He's got a great handle. He definitely is the one who's in control of the offense. So that's why they put him at the 1, kind of like a LeBron 1, not really playing in his proper position. If you're 100% asking me, I think he would be a lot better at the 3. But the problem is you've got Ben Simmons and you've got Josh Richardson as your shooting guard. He's a pretty good shooting guard for this team. He can shoot the 3. He defends pretty exceptionally. But he's really not going to be your Jimmy Butler guy who can just get his own shot in the end of the game, which is really what you liked at that position. That was, I think, what was going to work best for this really still really young 76ers roster. And then at the 3, everybody knows last year they made the, big or not so big, depending on how you view the NBA in general, move to swing to get Tobias Harris. I believe they got him at the deadline last year. And he seems like a great pickup. Unfortunately, he's like the 3rd or 4th best player on this team, so he really gets relegated to a role playing position. Even though I'm not certain that that's where he's most effective. It's really hard to say. But, you've got a player like Al Horford on the court who's a really, really good floor spacer, a really, really good... Actually, he plays his best basketball, in my opinion, at the center. So he's really a big insurance policy for Joel Embiid's potential. Missing games here or there was the reason they got him. But I just don't know if it's 100% smart to pay Al Horford as much as you're paying him when he's really not giving you, too much exceptional play. We'll really see if he's able to up his level of production in the postseason, and I think that happens for a lot of players of his caliber and his age. They really have to wait to turn it on in the playoffs. I think this roster also suffers for a little bit from the regular season woes of we have to play like 15 guys, 13 guys, and it's just we don't have 13 good guys. Like, you go down the rotation, I just ran it down really quick. Just Ben Simmons, Josh Richardson, Tobias Harris, Al Horford, Joel Embiid. Those guys are going to eat up most of the minutes a night. I expect Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid to be hard-pressed to get off the floor. They're probably going to be playing around 40 minutes a night. Actually, we will see about Joel Embiid's minutes because we just desperately want to see him healthy throughout the whole postseason to see if he is really able to make an impact from the center position in the NBA in the playoffs. We haven't seen it in quite some time where a center was able to be the focal point of his offense and really lead a team to any particular success. The last time I'm trying to think of the last championship team that won with their best player being a center. I'm actually struggling to come up with it, but I think it might be Shaquille O'Neal in 2001. That might be a little bit too far back. I might be forgetting someone. I'm almost certain I'm forgetting someone, but yeah. It's been a while since we've seen a dominant big man really run through the playoffs. Nikola Jokic, he was able to make it to the conference finals last year, I believe. Conference semifinals? Yeah, conference semifinals, because they got beat by the Trailblazers, and then the Trailblazers they went on to go be swept by the Golden State Warriors, the fully loaded Warriors, pretty much. They weren't even fully loaded. I believe they didn't have KD in that series, or Clay. Maybe they had Clay. I don't know if they had Clay, but they definitely didn't have KD because KD came back in the middle of the Raptors series. So, really, what I'm just trying to say is I'm not 100% sure that a center can really carry your team in the NBA. Especially when your bench reads off like Furkan Korkmaz, Alec Burks, Glenn Robinson, Shake Milton, Mike Scott. You've got Matisse Thybulle on that roster too. He's probably going to end up getting some minutes in the postseason just because he's a rookie that's promising and that can really guard, but he's not going to provide you anything on offense. All those players that I just listed have clear strengths and weaknesses. You got Furkan, who can really shoot it. Alec Burks can shoot it pretty well. Glenn Robinson's not a terrible shooter. But these are not your Kyle Korver Archer types. They're not going to be sitting on the three-point line and pulling it. Glenn Robinson is the type that really actually does want the ball. They acquired Glenn and Alec from Golden State right around the deadline this year. And they were both playing pretty well on a Golden State team that had just about nothing. So their stats are pretty inflated, in my opinion, from that. And I just don't think any of these players are really going to be super, super impactful. I think Furkan Korkmaz will actually be the best player coming off their bench, just because I think he's actually a legitimate spray and pray 3 sniper. I'll just put a little addendum by Shake Milton's name because I played him in fantasy this year, and he definitely had his best game of his career against me 1 week in fantasy, and I'll just never forget it. So respect on Shake Milton's name. Anyway, I just wanted to really quick run down, my thoughts about the 76ers. I'm not sure if they really are a sleeper contender. I think that there's a chance that they are a sleeper contender just because their defense is so good and that buckets are just harder to come by in the postseason in general. And when you have a really big lineup with a lot of stars who can, these players can get their own shots. They're not efficient, but I feel comfortable enough giving the ball to anybody in the first 5 people in the second or the third quarter, and just telling them, we can't really get too many buckets right now. People aren't scoring. Just try to find your own. And I think in that regard, they might be a contender. There's not a mismatch at any position. You're never gonna have a defensive advantage where you're just like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be, Giannis versus Kyle O'Quinn or something insane matchup that you just completely feast on. I don't think there's a single one like that, but I think that the 76ers definitely create a lot of mismatches, and mismatches matter a lot in the playoffs. So I think in that regard they really could compete with the big dog. This team's got a capability to make a finals. The Bucks are gonna have to go through them. I don't know if Giannis knows how to beat Al Horford yet. And Joel Embiid's certainly going to be clogging up that lane. It's funny. That's going to be a really funny series to watch because the Bucks are going to give up so many open threes and the 76ers are going to break so many open threes. I guess that's what you have Furkan Korkmaz for, but man, I really wish that I still had this little dude named JJ Redick. he just would solve so many problems 76ers have. But the 76ers' biggest problem is having played Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons at the same time, and I'm not 100% sure how you solve that. I'm not sure if it fits better in the postseason. We've seen it a couple times. They were in that game against the Raptors, obviously. I've discussed Jimmy Butler hit and he would have been an insane game winner for him too. But then Kawhi Leonard hits the game winner of game winners in Game 7 as the clock expires. And the 76ers, I don't know, maybe that's the closest they ever get. Maybe they really are the biggest disappointment in years. I think that is kind of a fair assessment. They've got a huge payroll, a bunch of stars, all recognizable players. And they could get second round exited this year. So I think it's really hard to say. Anyway, I have been Jackson Hester. This has been Vindication Sports. I will see you guys again next time.